The moment my sister walked into that courtroom wearing our mother's pearl earrings, I knew she had already decided she'd won. She had that look she'd had her whole life, the lifted chin, the slow smile, the way her eyes moved past me like I was furniture she'd already sold. Her husband walked 2 steps behind her, nodding at everything she said before she said it. Their lawyer was expensive. I could tell by the shoes. My lawyer leaned close and whispered, "We have a strong case. Don't let them rattle you." I nodded. I didn't tell him what I had already decided. My father died on a Tuesday in October, 3 years before any of this. He left behind a 3-bay auto repair shop in Macon, Georgia, a 2009 Ford F-150 with 190,000 miles on it, and a will that was very clear about what he wanted. He left the shop to me, not to my sister, not to her husband, to me. He had his reasons. I was the one who spent every Saturday from age 12 underneath a car with him. I was the one who learned how to rebuild a carburetor before I learned how to parallel park. When he got sick the first time, I was the one who started handling the books. When he got sick the second time, I moved back home and ran the whole operation while he did his chemo on Thursdays and pretended to supervise on Fridays. My sister was in Atlanta with her husband and their 4-bedroom house and their membership at a golf club I'd never been invited to. She called Dad on his birthday and at Christmas, sometimes Easter. She sent nice cards. She was not there when he couldn't drive himself to his appointments anymore. She was not there when I learned how to negotiate with parts suppliers and manage 3 mechanics and deal with the health inspector and file quarterly taxes for a business that had never fully caught up with the digital age. She was not there when he asked me to sit beside him one night and told me he was proud of me and that he'd made sure I was taken care of. I was there for all of it. And then he was gone, and the shop was mine, and for 8 months everything was quiet. Then my sister called. It started the way these things always start, reasonably, almost gently. She said she'd been thinking. She said Dad had always told her the shop would be in the family. She said she and her husband wanted to be more involved, wanted to invest, wanted to be part of something meaningful. She used the word legacy twice in one phone call. I told her I was open to talking. We had dinner. Her husband talked a lot about vision and brand and how the shop could be modernized, expanded, franchised. He drew something on a napkin. My sister nodded at everything he drew. I ate my food and listened and said I needed time to think. I thought, and the more I thought, the more uncomfortable I felt. Not about the ideas, some of them weren't terrible. What made me uncomfortable was the way they talked about the shop like they'd already bought it. Like I was a detail that needed to be smoothed out. Like the 3 years I had spent holding that business together through a pandemic and supply chain problems, and losing one of our best mechanics to a shop in Columbus like none of that had actually happened. I said I wasn't interested in a partnership. Not with them. Not structured the way they were describing. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from a law firm in Atlanta. My sister was suing me for 50% ownership of the shop. The claim was based on an alleged verbal promise my father had made to her years ago. There were affidavits. There was language about undue influence, about me taking advantage of my father during his illness. There were words in that document that I read 3 times because I couldn't believe they were about me. About the person who had slept in a hospital chair. About the person who had cried in the parking lot of a Home Depot because I needed to hold it together until I got somewhere private. I sat at my kitchen table with that letter for a long time. Then I called a lawyer. Mine was a woman named Patricia, which I appreciated, and she had been handling small business disputes in Georgia for 22 years, which I appreciated more. She read the filing, asked me a list of very specific questions, and then told me I had an excellent case. The will was clear. There was no written record of any promise. The verbal claim would be difficult to prove. She gave me a her fee estimate to take this all the way if we needed to, and I did not flinch, even though the number was significant. "We'll win this," she said. "I know," I said, and then I told her what I actually wanted to do. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You want to explain that again?" I explained it again. She was quiet for longer this time. Here's what Patricia didn't know yet, what I hadn't explained to her yet, what my sister and her husband and their expensive lawyer absolutely did not know. I had spent 3 years with the books of that shop open in front of me. I knew every line. I knew every obligation. I knew what the shop looked like from the outside, a going concern, family-owned, established 1987, Good reputation, loyal customer base, and I knew what it looked like from the inside. My father had been a brilliant mechanic and a generous man and not, to put it kindly, a sophisticated borrower. In 2019, he had taken out an SBA loan of $160,000 to replace equipment and expand the second bay. The balance when he died was just under $140,000. The terms were not flexible. The personal guarantee had transferred, under the terms of the estate, to the owner of the business. In 2020, during the worst months, he had gotten behind on payroll taxes. He'd worked it out with the IRS through a payment plan, but that plan had 19 months left on it, and a balance of a little over $38,000. It was current. It was also a lien. 2 of our 3 mechanics had been with my father for over a decade. When I took over, I had renegotiated their arrangements to keep them. What I had signed because I had wanted to be fair, because I had wanted to honor what my father had built, were 2-year employment agreements with guaranteed minimum hours and a severance clause that, if triggered by a change in ownership, would cost roughly $24,000 per employee. And then there was the matter of the underground storage tank. Every automotive shop that's been around long enough has a version of this story. Ours involved a fuel storage tank installed in 1991, before the regulations changed, that had been flagged during an environmental review in 2021. The EPA had issued a compliance agreement. We were in year 2 of a 5-year remediation plan. Annual cost, $18,000. Non-negotiable, non-transferable in the sense that whoever owned the property owned the obligation. I knew all of this. I had lived with all of this for 3 years. I had made it work because I understood every piece of it, and because I had built my life around making it work. My sister thought she was suing me for a thriving family business with a good reputation and a steady customer base. She was not wrong about any of those things. She just didn't know what came attached. I told Patricia I wanted to settle. I wanted to give my sister exactly what she was asking for, 50% of the business, and I wanted to step away entirely. I did not want money. I did not want a buyout. I wanted to sign whatever needed to be signed and walk out the door. You understand, Patricia said very carefully, that you would be giving up a significant asset. I understand. And you want to do this without them figuring out why, I said. At least not from me. That's their lawyer's job. Patricia did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said, I want to be clear that my professional obligation is to inform you that this is not the strategically optimal. I know, I said. I've done the math. She asked me to come into her office the following week. She wanted to go through everything with me in person before she agreed to move forward with it. I thought that was reasonable. I went. We sat across from each other for 2 hours, and she asked every question she could think of, and I answered all of them, and at the end she looked at me with something I couldn't quite read. You're not doing this to be kind, she said. I'm doing it because I'm tired, I said, and because I want to be done, and because I don't need anyone to lose for me to be okay. She nodded slowly. And you've thought about what happens to them. They're adults, I said. They have a lawyer. That's his job. Patricia filed the settlement offer the following Monday. 50% ownership of the business, effective immediately upon execution of the agreement, with full disclosure of all existing liabilities to be provided at document exchange as required by law. My sister could have the whole thing if she wanted. The settlement included a clause allowing her to purchase my remaining 50% at fair market value within 90 days, which, once the liabilities were factored in, was going to be a very different number than she was imagining. I want to tell you that what happened next was fast. It was not. Legal things are not fast, and I spent 4 months watching the process move at the speed of cold syrup. There were filings and responses and a mediation session that went nowhere, and then a pre-trial conference that I sat through mostly staring at the table. My sister looked at me across that conference table like she was waiting for me to break. Like this was a contest of wills and she expected to outlast me. Her husband sat beside her doing the nodding thing. Their lawyer spoke in the smooth, measured tones of someone billing by the hour. I looked back at her and felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Almost nothing. Not anger, not grief, not the hollow ache I'd been carrying since the funeral. Something had settled in me in the months since I'd filed that settlement offer, something quiet and solid, and I realized sitting there that I had already let go. I had let go, not of the shop. I still loved that shop, still loved the smell of motor oil and the sound of an engine turning over clean, still loved the guys who'd worked there for years and who had texted me when they heard about the lawsuit to say they were sorry but of the need to prove anything to anyone. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in March. The document exchange happened the Wednesday before. That was when their lawyer read everything. I was not there for that moment. I learned about it from Patricia, who called me that evening and said, in the tone of someone trying very hard not to sound amused, "Their counsel has requested a delay." "How long a delay?" I asked. "He's asking for 2 weeks to review the disclosure documents." I said that seemed reasonable. "He also asked," Patricia continued, "whether you would be willing to take a call." I said that also seemed reasonable. Their lawyer called me the next morning. He introduced himself again, even though we had met twice. He asked if I was represented on this call. I said yes. Patricia was on the line. He said he wanted to discuss the terms of the settlement in light of the disclosed liabilities. I waited. He began, very carefully, to describe what he had found in the documents: the SBA loan, the IRS payment plan, the employment agreements, and the severance provisions, the EPA compliance agreement, and the remediation schedule. He described each item in the tone of a man who had gone home the night before and looked very hard at his ceiling. When he finished, there was a silence. "Yes," I said. "That's accurate." Another silence. "Miss," he started, and then stopped. "I want to make sure my clients fully understand what they would be assuming. That's what the disclosure is for," I said. He said he needed more time to advise his clients. I said that was fine. Patricia and I exchanged a look across her conference table that involved no words at all. They asked for a meeting. Not a formal mediation, a meeting, the four of us and our lawyers, in a conference room at a neutral location. I agreed. My sister arrived looking different. The lifted chin was the same, but something in the eyes had changed. Her husband sat down and didn't say anything the whole time, which was a first. Their lawyer did the talking. He had, he said, conducted a thorough review of the business's financial obligations. He outlined each one. He was professional about it, which I respected. He didn't editorialize. He just laid out the numbers. The total liability picture, between the loan balance, the tax agreement, the potential severance exposure, and the remediation costs through the end of the compliance period, came to somewhere north of $240,000, much of it immediate and structured, none of it negotiable without significant legal and financial consequences. He said his clients were reconsidering the terms of the proposed settlement. My sister was looking at me. Not through me the way she usually did. At me, like she was trying to find something in my face. I didn't say anything. I had nothing to add. Patricia said, quietly, that we were prepared to proceed to trial on Thursday if the current settlement framework was not acceptable, and that we remained confident in our position on the merits of the underlying claim. Their lawyer asked if there was any flexibility in the settlement terms. Patricia looked at me. I thought about it. "Tell me what you're actually asking," I said. My sister spoke for the first time. "Did you know about all of this when you agreed to settle?" I looked at her. "Yes." She held my eyes. "And you still agreed." "I wanted to be done," I said. "I still do." "Why didn't you just—" She stopped, started again. "Why didn't you fight us?" I had thought about how to answer this question if it came. I had thought about it on long drives and in the early mornings before the shop opened and in the mediation session when I'd been staring at the table. I had the answer ready, but hearing her ask it out loud made something shift in my chest, some last remaining tightness. "Because you're my sister," I said. "And I knew that when you found out, you would understand something that I couldn't explain to you in a way you'd believe." She waited. "You wanted what Dad built," I said. "You just didn't know what it cost him. What it cost me. How much of yourself you have to give to hold something like that together. I couldn't tell you, so I let you find out." The room was very quiet. Her husband was looking at the table. Their lawyer was looking at his notepad. Patricia was looking at the window. My sister looked like she might say something and then decided not to. The settlement fell apart that afternoon, as I had expected it would, but not in the way I had expected. They didn't fight me, and they didn't retreat entirely. What happened was more complicated and more human than either of those things. Their lawyer called Patricia 2 days later with a different proposal. My sister was dropping the lawsuit entirely. In exchange, she was asking for nothing, not the business, not a buyout, not any formal acknowledgement of her claim. The case would be dismissed with prejudice. Each party would cover their own legal costs. Patricia called me to relay the offer with the careful neutrality of someone who had been doing this for 22 years and had seen most things but maybe not quite this. I said yes without needing time to think about it. The dismissal was filed the following Monday. I drove to the shop that morning in my father's truck, the one with 190,000 miles, which had become 203,000 miles in the 3 years since he passed. I pulled into the lot and sat for a minute looking at the sign he'd had repainted in 2015, the one with the font he'd argued about with the sign company for 2 weeks. I went inside and made coffee in the break room, and when Tommy, my longest-tenured mechanic, came in and asked how the lawyer stuff turned out, I said it was over. He nodded like that was all he needed to know and went to start his first job of the day. My sister called me about 2 weeks after the dismissal, not to argue, not to relitigate. She called in the voice she used when she was being careful, when she was trying, and I understood that this was its own kind of courage for her. She said she hadn't known. About the loan, about the taxes, about what I had done to keep things running after Dad died. She said she should have asked. She said she should have been there more, and that she had told herself stories about why she wasn't, and that she had let those stories make her believe things that weren't fair. I listened. She said she was sorry. I told her I believed her. She asked if I thought things could be different. Not fixed, not erased, but different. I told her I thought that depended on what different looked like in practice, and that I wasn't interested in a relationship that only existed on holidays and in texts, and that I had spent 3 years not being someone's obligation, and I didn't intend to start now. She said that was fair. We talked for a while longer, about nothing consequential, about small things, about a restaurant she'd been to, and a problem I was having with a supplier and something funny one of her kids had said. By the end of the call, something had not been resolved. Some things don't resolve. They just change shape, but something else had started. I don't know yet what it will become. I'm not in a hurry to name it. What I know is this. I have the shop. I have the loan and the tax plan and the remediation costs and the employment agreements and the 203,000-mile truck. I have the guys who've been there for years and who care about the work and who text me when something matters. I have the smell of motor oil in the morning and the satisfaction of a clean diagnostic and the particular quiet of locking up at the end of a long day. My sister wanted what she thought my father had built. She wanted the name and the legacy and the sense of belonging to something that outlasted him. I understand that. I wanted the same thing. The difference is that I stayed and learned what it actually cost. You don't inherit something real without inheriting everything it carries. The history, the debt, the days your father couldn't come in and you had to be the one everyone looked at, the Tuesday mornings when the numbers didn't add up and you stayed an hour late making them add up. The way pride feels when it's built from something you almost didn't survive. My father knew what he was giving me. He knew I was the only one who had already paid part of the price and would understand the rest of it. He wasn't leaving me a burden. He was leaving me proof that I had already shown up, that I had already chosen it, over and over, before it was legally mine. The papers just made it official. And some mornings, when the light comes through the bay doors at a certain angle, and a car turns over right on the first crank, and Tommy hollers something from the back about the Falcons that makes the other guys laugh some mornings, the weight of all of it feels exactly like what it is. Mine.